All right. Are you ready, Kathryn?
Yes, I'm excited to be back.
All right. So, episode 3 of the HCD VidCast. Today, we're continuing our little modules on psychological tools in market research. Today, we're going to focus on mood mapping. Excited to be here with Kathryn to introduce ourselves again. My name is Michelle Niedziela, and I'm VP of Research and Innovation at HCD. Background, I have a PhD in behavioral neuroscience, and I'm here with Kathryn. Introduce yourself.
Yep. Hi, everyone. I am Kathryn Ambroze. I am the Manager of Behavioral and Marketing Sciences at HCD. My background is in neuroscience and business as well, and I graduated from Muhlenberg College. And we're really thrilled to be chatting with everyone today.
So those of you that might be new to our conversations, we've been doing a series of conversations between Kathryn and I about various topics. We work at HCD, which is a market research and consumer research supplier. We use a wide range of tools to look at consumer and market behaviors and understandings to see how consumers interact with different types of stimuli, anything from media to products, whatever it might be. We do it globally. We do it across the spectrum of things that you might do, from exploration to validation. We've been doing this for almost 30 years now. So enough about that. Let's dive right in. Today we're talking about a cool topic, at least near and dear to me, because we recently got a patent on it. We are talking about mood mapping. So mood mapping is kind of exactly what it sounds like. It's having a way to visualize the emotional product experiences that consumers have, like basically stemming from, the need when we do reporting to clients after we do our research to visualize that in a way that's clear and understandable. Because, a lot of times when you're looking at psychological research or neuroscience research, it's really detailed and super scientific and can be difficult to digest in simple imagery. So the goal behind creating the whole mood mapping methodology was to find a way to do that in the clearest and most simple way possible, so that when you bring it back into your company, you can explain it to anyone within the company without having to give too much background, and people would sort of get what that means. So what's going on? Well, we look at the way people, particularly consumers, interact with the world around them, right? And we view it as a 5-dimensional experience. Usually think things in 2D or 3D. Well, we look at it as a 5D because that's how you experience the world, right?
Yep.
So those 5 dimensions are everything you take in. Things you see, hear, smell, taste, touch. Those are like all your sensory things, 5 dimensions. And those things can affect lots of different things, right, Kathryn?
Of course, that makes sense. I mean, like you said, every product that we use is going to have, the 5 dimensions, the 5 senses that you have.
Yeah.
You
might taste a product. Maybe you don't always lick the product, right? So maybe you're not like licking a cell phone, but you do touch it and you feel it.
It's got not at these times.
Yeah, don't do it now. It's got a weight to it, and all these little aspects of the things you interact with, they communicate in ways that can actually change your perception, right? So they can have an effect on your mood. That from like thinking about candles, right? Or maybe mood lighting, right? It can affect how positive or negative you feel. Same with the colors that are on, packaging or the texture or whatever it might be.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And I think that kind of what you were saying about the idea of the candles, I feel like it really does involve also this context. I'm really happy is up here because it's such a crucial part of the whole experience, is really setting that context with those 5 dimensions.
Absolutely. So, that smell that you've created from the candle, it's going to affect your mood, positive or negative. It might make you more excited or more relaxed, right? Because a lot of times, people will use candles to be more relaxed. But it can also set the context, having like a candlelight dinner really effective in a fancy French restaurant, maybe a little out of place at McDonald's, right?
Right.
But it brings everything together, right? So like the sort of setting you have in McDonald's versus the setting you have in the fancy French restaurant, it's cohesive with the whole experience. It's the lighting, it's the colors, it's, the menu, every bit of the experience kind of adds together. Yeah, it sets the mood, it sets the stage. And so it's important to be able to measure all those things and to see how they add up into that consumer experience, and that they add up correctly, right? So they need to match. Right. So I guess the question then becomes like, how do you make sure that there is a match? And the first step to that is being able to measure that experience. And that can be the really difficult part, to measure that mood. We rely on a multidimensional approach to emotion. And the multidimensional approach means that when someone experiences something like an emotion, right, you can put that on a couple of different dimensions. You can sort of chop it up, that emotion, into pieces that add up to it. So like the idea of happiness, it's part being positive, right, so pleasant, part being aroused or having some intensity to it. So it's not a sleepy experience, it's more of an awake experience. And then also it's something that's sort of drawing the attention. So if you look at the graph here, you can see that something is more pleasant and more intense can be considered in that happy space, glad or happy, right? Whereas something that is more negative experience, but arousing as well, might make you feel angry.
Yeah. So how are these words chosen? Is it a grouping of words, or can these words be interchangeable?
These are kind of like labels or descriptors, and it's not like exact on here. This is sort of a way of describing that sort of area. There has been research in the past where they looked at imagery that had been labeled as like a happy image, right? And they were able to map it out using different scales to show what it was for pleasantness and what it was for arousal. So there is validation of this model. But yeah, that's a great question, right? Now, what's not shown on here is like the attention scale, because it's really difficult to see things in 3D. So that's not shown here, but you can see it on the next slide. And the reason, we kind of expand on it into the next slide is because you can see on this one that fear and anger are really close to each other. And that might be confusing, right? Because we know that like there's a huge difference between fear and anger.
Right. So basically you're saying with this two-dimensional model, it can be a little confusing if there is, you get your research and then you're looking at it, you're looking at your results and you're like, all right, well, I know it's somewhere in between there, which one essentially, like, can we really differentiate this?
Well, the way you can differentiate something like that, because both fear and anger are very intense emotions that are unpleasant. And that's why they map out the same on a 2D scale. But when you bring in that third dimension of approach avoidance, or like how much attention someone's putting towards something, then you can see things start to separate. So where it went from the 2D on the left side of the screen, it can go over to the 3D on the right side, where you can see there's actually a huge difference between fear and anger, which we knew, right? So if you're angry at something, you're more likely to approach it. Whereas if you're afraid, you're retreating from it, you're avoiding it. So it does pay to have that third dimension to help differentiate. On the surface, it can be really good to look at the 2 dimensions, and you can start to see where things map out. So if we go back a slide, where this can be used is like the stars you see on the graph could be test samples that you're measuring, right? And you can kind of see where they all net out, and you can compare them to benchmarks.
Okay.
So you can actually then statistically show that one is performing better than the benchmark, or maybe better than another test sample.
So when you're saying you can statistically determine this, so there is a score that kind of goes along with these with these test samples.
Well, where you get the numbers from is that you actually measure each of these scales. You have a measure for arousal, you have a measure for pleasantness, and a measure for attention. So you're getting absolute values there that then you can compare statistically to show that there's differences.
That makes sense. So that's where the real scoring comes in. Got it.
So there's a couple of different ways to do that. One is something we call Mood Map LITE, and that uses a pictorial scale. So what you can see here on the left side is using a methodology called SAM, or self-assessment Manikin, and that is a nonverbal scale. So what you see here underneath that text are images where in the top one, I know it's really small to see right now, but you can see the person smiling, and as you go further on the scale, they get more to be frowning. The one below that, so that's a pleasantness scale. So very pleasing on the left to unpleasant on the right. Under that, you can actually see how sort of like activated somebody is. So on the left, they're very aroused, right? And on the right, they're more calm.
Right.
Excuse me. And then on the bottom, you can see a little person going up to a big person. And that's how sort of dominated you feel, or what that approach withdrawal is. So, with the little person, that means you're feeling rather small, or you're feeling rather dominated. You're avoiding something. Whereas if the figure gets bigger, then the person is feeling stronger. Right? So you're feeling, more in control. So these pictorial scales don't require you to say, I am feeling happy. Rather, you can just very quickly and easily, mark something along that scale. And then we can map those things out.
Okay. And so this is pretty similar to the original mood map. It's just really
what we didn't talk about in the original mood map is actually one of the ways that we do this is using physiological measures.
Okay.
So if we go back to here, the pleasantness scale, we typically use facial EMG, right? So that's a measure of emotion using muscles in the face. And then arousal can be measured using GSR, galvanic skin response. And then finally, attention can be used using heart rate, right?
Okay.
So that's a really sensitive measure using physiological neuroscientific measures. Mood map LITE is using not having to do, any where you're wiring someone up, but rather you can have them do a paper ballot or have them do it online. So this can also be done online or on a computer.
That's great.
So it's kind of, that's why we call it the LITE version, because it doesn't require you to have to wire someone up, because it's just a little bit easier and can be done online.
Okay, and since this is a self-reporting measure, does that mean that it's measuring the exact same thing as the psychophysiological measures that you just listed, or?
They're very tightly correlated.
Okay.
So you see the same patterns, but the physiological is a lot more sensitive. So it's going to be a lot more precise of a measure. But you can definitely get the same sort of directional idea from Mood Map LITE.
Okay, and then one other question. In terms of sample size, is this more or less compared to?
So with the physiological measure, you definitely can have a smaller sample size than if you're doing something online. Anytime you're doing like quant online, you need a lot more people because you can get a lot more variability with something that's not as tight of a measure.
Okay, that makes sense.
So same thing here. You can actually see, as you can see here on the right side of the screen, if you start with the prototype, you can actually see how it compares to whether or not how it matches to a brand. And that's kind of the next idea we want to talk about. Where this can be used most effectively can be seen in this case study we're going to talk about, which asks the question, how does your product meet the promise? Really talking about how well does the product meet the marketing campaign, right? So we actually presented this at a conference, Pangborn. And for those of you who don't know Kathryn, this is actually Kathryn. And the way we did this study is we had people smell a fragrance and then fill out a survey. We also measured them while they were smelling. You can see Kathryn's wired up here. And we measured their biometrics, or their neuroscience physiology, while they were sniffing for 30 seconds. And then we gave them an ad exposure to see, okay, now they're going to see the ad for that fragrance. And the fragrance was a perfume, 2 perfumes actually. And we measured them during that experience as well. And again, they did a fit to concept survey. So the idea was to see, okay, is there a match between the fragrance when they smell the perfume? Does that match the message that's going on in the commercial? Now, why would you want these things to be matched? Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I would just think you would want them to be matched. Like, just as a consumer, you would think you'd want them to match because you want to make sure that you're you're getting what you're signing up for when you're looking at an ad.
Yeah, exactly. So like if the ad is telling you something like this car is super sporty and adventurous, right? That should match the car that you're actually going to have, right?
Yeah.
The reason I bring up that one is because I always thought it was really interesting how some cars, brand of cars have been sort of changing their MO. So like if you think about Volvo, for example, people think of it as like the safe mom car, right?
Of course, we had one growing up.
See, exactly. But the ads that are out there right now are talking about Volvo being adventurous. So is that a match for what you actually perceive from the product? Maybe not. What does that do to the overall success of either the campaign or the product? So it's really important to make sure you have cohesion there so that the messaging matches the experience, or rather the product meets the promise that you're having in your ads. So what we end up being able to find on being able to do these measures is on the left, you can see the fragrance experience, and on the right, you can see the ad experience, and they did not match. So if you look at, you can actually see that there are quadrants in each of these graphs. So on the left, in the graph on the left, you can see that they're in the upper right quadrant. The fragrance experience for both fragrances, the pink and the purple, were both positive and arousing. So in that sort of happy space, right? That excited, happy space. But the experience with the ad was totally different. It was in the bottom right quadrant. So while it was still a positive experience, it wasn't as arousing. So that's not a match. And so that's really interesting to be able to see, but using the mood map, you can actually see it visually striking, right? So whereas, before, whenever you're using these types of measures, you'd have all these bar charts and numbers and statistics and everything, which we still can provide. The whole idea of the mood map is you can see very clearly that these things are not in the same areas.
That's interesting. And is this a good way to be, is this predictive of anything, or is it really just helping you see like cohesion?
So we haven't actually tested out for prediction, but what we do know is that market success has a lot to do with cohesion. So, a lot of products out there fail in the market. In fact, I think it's like 75 to 80% of new product introductions fail. And a lot of that might have to do with the emotional experience and how cohesive it is. So there's an understanding out there that those ideas of emotion and cohesion are linked to brand loyalty and purchase intent. So there's a good case to be made that being able to have that brand harmony, match your brand to the product, have that harmonization will increase your chances of success in the market. Yeah.
Okay. And then just one other question I do have. So I see here, this is focusing really on fragrance and an ad. Can those be interchanged with, say, eating something, or,
Oh yeah. Yeah.
texture
Any
of some
experience
sort?
You can have. Yes. And it doesn't have to be an ad either. It could be measuring the experience with packaging, right? And comparing it to the product use. So on the left, it could be using the lotion, and on the right, it's looking at the package. Or maybe on the left, it's looking at the logo, and on the right, it's the spokesperson, right?
Okay, so you can swap out certain things like fragrance or ad for other sensory experiences, and kind of cater to whatever you're looking for. That's interesting.
Yeah. And in this case, it was physiology, but, again, you could do Mood Map LITE and do it, the lighter version, which could be online. So you could test something that doesn't have to be sniffed or doesn't have to be, tried on the skin.
Is it possible to do it? I'm just kind of thinking, I'm almost snowballing this, but would it be possible to do more than just two components? Could you really make it a full sensory experience?
Yeah, sure. Like, why not, right? Because you want it all to be cohesive. So let's break it down. Let's have the fragrance of the lotion, the feel of the lotion, with the brand, with the package, with the commercial, and see, okay, which one of these is not like the others, right?
Yes,
and perhaps
exactly.
that's the one that needs to be worked on. Yeah, exactly.
That makes a lot of sense. And I feel like that fits really nicely with this overall question of, does your product meet the promise?
Absolutely. And so it's really something, that it's taking stuff we were already doing before, but making it really easy to communicate, really clear to see, and really just an easier experience overall for our clients. And that's why it was a particularly good innovation for us.
Yeah, this sounds really awesome. And I'm glad we were able to chat about it today and, just answer some of the questions that I knew I had about it, just to learn about it, even just from the perspective of a consumer. I think this was really helpful.
Absolutely. Yeah. So thank you everybody for joining us. You can find us on LinkedIn by searching HCD Research. You can contact Kathryn or I. Our emails are on the screen. Please feel free to follow us on Twitter or tweet with us. Kathryn actually does a ton of tweeting on scientific stuff. And she's also been writing a lot of blogs on this stuff. So feel free to visit the blog that you can see on the bottom right and follow us on Twitter that you can see on the bottom left.
One other thing I do want to mention is if you do have an interest in this and would like to know more, we offer white papers about these topics. So if you are interested in learning more about implicit, or you would like to learn a little bit more about how you could apply Mood Map, feel free to reach out to us and we'd be more than happy to share our white papers with you.
We would love your feedback. Please feel free to add a comment below. Follow us on YouTube as well. Subscribe to the channel and feel free to like it, comment on it. We want to hear from you.
All right. Thanks, everybody. And we hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. Till next time.
Bye.
Bye.